I've given this presentation on a number of occasions this year already, but I felt that it was necessary to have it documented and uploaded online, particularly for individuals new to the Bitcoin space who don't have the fundamental knowledge of Bitcoin's history and the scaling debate of the last few years. Now, it all begins with a bit of backstory relating to a man named Gavin Andresen, and this guy is essentially the co-founder of Bitcoin. In 2011, when Satoshi Nakamoto left the project, he handed full control over to Gavin, full control of the Bitcoin source code repository on GitHub. And upon his departure, he said that the project is now in good hands. So both these people understood that for Bitcoin to spread globally, the block size must be increased so that it can scale and handle global usage. Now, between the years 2011 and 2014, Gavin allowed other individuals access to the Bitcoin GitHub repository. One of them was Gregory Maxwell. It was well known that this guy did not think Bitcoin transactions should be on-chain in the long term. So already at this point in time, there were people proposing side chains like Lightning Network, which we have today. And in 2014, Gavin actually stepped down as the lead developer. So some of these other individuals he added took over that role. At the end of 2014, in October, Blockstream, a for-profit company, was founded by Gregory Maxwell, who became CTO, and Adam Back, who was CEO, and a few other individuals who had Bitcoin GitHub commit access. A month after their foundation, Blockstream had already announced their intent to develop monetized sidechains, the Lightning Network. And they sought investments from outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem. A month after their foundation, they had already raised 21 million US dollars. Fast forward a few months, June 2015, Gavin concludes his work on Bitcoin with Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 101, and that was basically just saying, look, we need to increase the block size, this is how we're going to do it. And that was his last work for Bitcoin ever. A year later, May 2nd, 2016, Gavin wrote a blog post on his website where he said that he believes that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. And many people were shocked by this. The Blockstream developers claimed that Gavin had been hacked, and they revoked all his admin privileges and commit access for the Bitcoin GitHub repository. The next day, Gavin was speaking at Consensus, the conference, and he actually confirmed to people that no, he hadn't been hacked. This is a legitimate post by me on his website, and repeated his claim about Craig Wright. Despite this, though, they did not reinstate his access. They still haven't reinstated his access to this day. So basically, they took the opportunity to complete the coup, and at this point, they now had full control over Bitcoin as early as May 2016. So they've been free to pursue their for-profit business model ever since, and this is really when we start to see Bitcoin going downhill. So I asked this question to many people, but we've seen other e-caches in the past. Bitcoin's not the first attempt at electronic money, but the previous attempts had been destroyed very quickly. Why is Bitcoin still around now? It's been around for nearly 10 years now. So they've had to take a different approach with this one because of the way that it's designed. But the central banks and governments do want to stop this, believe you me. And they went about this by doing a few different things. Firstly, they corrupted the system from within. And they've also used bribery or investments to get their way. And it's pretty clear by the actions of the Blockstream developers that they have in fact received investments from these groups publicly, and I would almost guarantee backdoor deals that we don't know anything about as well. So they've also, and this is another big one, but divide and conquer tactics among the community. So they've split us into two camps, the ones that are believing in the original white paper, which is, as Satoshi and Gavin both knew, we needed to increase the blockchain block size to scale Bitcoin for the long-term scale for global adoption. And the other camp is Blockstream, the Blockstream group, who want to pursue their monetized side chains like Lightning. And they want to keep the block size small to force people onto Lightning. So basically by doing this, the community as a whole is now not as strong as it used to be, united. They are now fighting amongst each other, and they've lost track of the real goal and the real enemy, which is actually central banks and government. It's a big problem, but it's derailed us. And another tactic they use is the censorship, mass censorship online on the social media platforms like Reddit, Bitcoin Talk, Twitter. And they also attack and slander the individuals who are presenting logical arguments against theirs and intellectual discussion. But at the same time, they are elevating people who are unwittingly fighting for them, or who have also been paid to go and promote certain ideas. And finally, they've made it clear that they like to accuse their enemy of what they themselves are doing, because then that diverts attention away from themselves, and the other people, whether the claims are true or not, but if it's repeated enough, other people will then focus on the target and attack them for the claims being made, which are mostly baseless. With Blockstream, the company, there are, in fact, many, many concerns that they've demonstrated over the last few years. Well, firstly, their CTO, Samson Mow, has openly said that Bitcoin isn't for people that live on less than $2 a day, in response to increased fees for sending a transaction on the Bitcoin network. Now, that's a big problem in itself, because half the reason why people got into Bitcoin in the first place was because it was practically free to transact. It was instant, and you could send it to anyone, anywhere in the world without asking for permission or without going through a third party. And just by taking out people who live on less than $2 a day, that is actually eliminating a large percentage of the intended users of Bitcoin globally. It should be sub-cent fees like we're getting on Bitcoin Cash right now, not $50+, which we saw at the end of last year, which was very terrible, in fact. This same group of people have declared Bitcoin no longer peer-to-peer electronic cash, but now it's apparently a store of value, a digital gold. But what they don't understand is that the reason why Bitcoin became a good store of value and increased in value over the years it was not because it's a Ponzi scheme, but because the amount of transactions that were happening on the Bitcoin network itself were actually increasing as more and more people started using it for transactions and found value in Bitcoin because it had good utility. That is no longer the case with where they've taken Bitcoin today. So they intentionally crippled it, and it destroyed Bitcoin's first mover advantage, its usability in commerce, and that allowed other copycat altcoins or inferior altcoins to rise up and begin to challenge the market dominance of Bitcoin, which dropped from 90% down to around 30% last year. Now, if you're running a business, I don't think that is something to be very proud of. And in fact, it would indicate that the people running the company have fucked up. So, another problem with Blockstream is if you look into the technicalities of their scaling solution, the Lightning Network, it's actually designed to replicate the current banking system that we're all trying to get away from. Blockstream has a history of character assassination attempts against those speaking out against SegWit, the Lightning Network, and their roadmap. And today you'll notice that most of their time and energy is spent attacking people like Roger Ver, who's in fact Bitcoin's biggest investor and promoter over the last couple of years. This guy lives and breathes Bitcoin, promotes every day all over the world, and they attack him like he's evil. They also have been attacking miners lately, particularly Bitmain, who is in fact the largest manufacturer of Bitcoin mining equipment in the world. And miners are people who are incentivized to make sure Bitcoin does well. They put money, they're the people who have skin in the game. They put money into their hardware, into maintaining that hardware, to provide security and integrity to the Bitcoin network. And it works in such a way that why would they attack the coin that they're mining? They want Bitcoin to perform well, and in fact they are the ones who have the most skin in the game over people like developers and users. So that's another false narrative they've created, that the miners are evil. That's totally not the case. And today you'll also notice that there's non-stop attacks against Bitcoin Cash, people supporting Bitcoin Cash, people trying to spend Bitcoin as cash, who are not hodling it. And this is coming from the same group of people who claimed that when Bitcoin Cash split last year, that Bitcoin Cash would immediately be going to zero, it would be worthless, and they've been proven wrong, yet they still sprout their garbage. And if you followed their advice, you would actually be at a great loss right about now. So this is attacks on OG Bitcoiners and other people who just want to pursue on-chain scaling as was originally intended by Bitcoin's creators. And they want to follow the plan set out in the original white paper. Blockstream, I've checked this statistic again today, and they have to date received $151 million in funding from outside the Bitcoin ecosystem, and that's what we know of, to pursue 1 megabyte block sizes. Some of the Blockstream developers have actually advocated for lower block size than 1 megabyte, even though it's caused problems, to pursue segregated witness and also the Lightning Network. So these investments have came have come from mostly multinational corporations. Corporations who are threatened by the existence of a peer-to-peer electronic cash. And some of them include AXA Strategic Ventures, who invested $55 million US, whose CEO, Henry de Castries, is in fact the chairman of the Bilderberg Group. If you don't know what Bilderberg is, I will elaborate further on a later slide. Another investor, Digital Currency Group, who itself is funded by MasterCard, big red flag there, Amazon Web Services, so another globalist company, and their CEO is Barry Silbert, who's an ex-investment banker. And Digital Currency Group also own a propaganda outlet for Blockstream known as CoinDesk. That's a Digital Currency Group and Blockstream asset. Blockstream are guilty of censorship and orchestrating social media manipulation to push their agendas, as I mentioned before. So I suggest, if you want to find out more about this, just Google Reddit Bitcoin censorship by John Block on Medium. It's a good write-up which explains in depth more about what's going on there and provides a lot of hardcore evidence. So it was found out also that within the Bitcoin Core Slack channel, there was a secret group known as the Dragon's Den, with a number of people known as trolls and other Blockstream people, where it's believed that this is where they planned and launched operations online for trolling and disinformation. And this is typical of them, and these trolls never offer any kind of logical, intellectual arguments to discussion, but in doing what they do and by spamming disinfo, it's actually drowning out the legitimate discussion and important information that would otherwise be getting greater exposure. So these coordinated tactics and more were actually used over the last few years to destroy scaling proposals, Bitcoin XT, Bitcoin Classic, and also Bitcoin Unlimited. For example, Bitcoin XT, they wanted to increase the block size limit, and their nodes, as they were increasing in popularity and consensus, they came under denial of service attacks, and it eventually led to its destruction and getting shut down. But Mike Hearn, who was behind Bitcoin XT, wrote at length about this on his own blog. I recommend reading that one. It's pretty insightful as well. So one thing you need to understand is that these denial of service attacks and also the mass censorship and fake accounts and vote manipulation, it's not cheap. So someone with a lot of money or some group with a lot of money is bankrolling this, and who else would it be? Who else is threatened by the existence of peer-to-peer electronic cash? It's not very hard to put two and two together, connect the dots. So due to the Blockstream policies, we've seen the Bitcoin transaction growth rate decline. It had been increasing exponentially over years, but it's now going lower than it had been recently. And businesses who had once accepted Bitcoin as a payment method have dropped it due to slow transactions, insecure transactions with the addition of replaced by a fee, and also high transaction fees. Onto the Bilderberg Group. These are a secret collective of global elites who meet annually with the goal of expanding their influence and power over all other humans. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I recommend going and watching a documentary which explains this in depth, and it's called Endgame by Alex Jones. It's free to watch on YouTube. So these people, they've got control over pretty much all governments globally. They control all the central banks. That's how far their reach extends. And they're in control of a lot of the heads of multinational corporations. So the people at the top are pulling the strings, but that's how far their reach, that's how far the web extends. And ultimately, their control over humanity is threatened by the existence of a peer-to-peer electronic cash. So it's not in their interest for Bitcoin to succeed as it once did. They are in favor of crippling this and making it inferior to existing systems that they control. So now we've got some data here showing the result of Blockstream's policies. This is the Bitcoin average transaction fee historical chart over its whole life. So in 2011 to 2018, basically to the start of 2016, the fees were nothing. It was probably a few cents or sub-cent fees. Now, particularly during 2017, this started to change and we started going up and up as more people began using Bitcoin during the bull run of 2017. And actually at the peak of the bull run in 2017 in December, the average transaction fee was at $55 US. So just to send your money from A to B, you had to pay a $55 fee. That's ridiculous. Who would even use that over the existing systems? It doesn't make it any better. Now we've got the number of transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain per day chart. And as you can see over time, this has been generally increasing exponentially. And in fact, the increase in transactions occurring on the blockchain can be directly correlated with the price going up over time. But now, where we are currently, this year, after the end of the bull market last year, we are now having less transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain than we've had in years. We're having now, on average, I'd say, less transactions than what we were having on the Bitcoin blockchain in the years 2016 and towards the end of 2015 as well, which is really bad. So this is showing that thanks to Blockstream policy, Bitcoin is actually going to negative adoption. Now here's the percentage of the total market capitalization chart, comparing Bitcoin against other altcoins. So Bitcoin has always maintained the highest dominance, well up in the 90s. So it was at 90% until January or around March last year. So that's when the 1 megabyte block size became well and truly full. And it actually plummeted from 90% down to around 30% dominance. So now Bitcoin is 30% of the total crypto space and altcoins are 70%. This is not good because after all, this is a competition. These coins are all competing for the top spot. Bitcoin can and probably will be dethroned on this current path. And what we can see here is that also this is trending down. So obviously it's fluctuating, but it's making lower highs on the way down. And also it's making now lower lows as it trends down. So that's, if you're a chartist, you'll know that this is a sign of a downtrend. And while that's happening on Bitcoin, these altcoins are actually in uptrends as far as their market dominance goes, a lot of them. Onto the Lightning Network now. And I'll just explain basically why this is not Bitcoin. So the Lightning Network, it's not transacting Bitcoins, but it's actually transacting IOUs for Bitcoin. So what they've slipped in here is a debt instrument. This is no longer sending around a currency, it's a debt instrument. And you can compare it to the way that people used gold certificates instead of gold because it was easier to send around. Bitcoin is no longer easy to send around. It's slow, insecure, and expensive. But on the Lightning Network, you're able to supposedly send things around for cheap. But like what happened with gold, this could potentially happen with Bitcoin and the Lightning Network later down the track. But the IOUs on gold exceeded the supply that is actually backing them. And that's the way the current financial system works as well. So the US dollar is supposed to be gold backed, but they actually haven't provided any kind of an audit in many decades now, I believe. Proving that they actually have gold to back up the money that they're printing out every day. And while I know that it's transparent on Lightning Network now, it's important to realize that tyrants don't go from step A to Z immediately. They take one bit at a time, and before you know it, you're under total tyranny, and that's where this is heading now. So they claim that the Lightning Network is supposed to be strictly Austrian school, which is Satoshi's vision, but instead it introduces Keynesianism, and that's the debt-based enslavement system, which we are indoctrinated into today. Over the long term, with the current roadmap of small block sizes, there is no chance of a global economy settling on 1 megabyte blocks. So this will force people onto the Lightning Network, and 99% of issuance will be in these Lightning IOUs instead of actual Bitcoin. So the issuance, 99% of issuance is going to be a debt instrument rather than a currency or commodity. The Lightning Network is intended as a peer-to-peer mesh network, they call it. But in actuality, it's already proven that it's headed towards becoming a centralized star network. This is for a few reasons. But a centralized Lightning Network is actually going to be way cheaper and easier to be functional than a decentralized one. So this is partly due to the fact that it lowers the settlement risk of transactions and allows for easier routing calculations. So you can think of routing like driving a car to work. You have a pre-planned route in your head, and as you travel down streets, if another car comes along and drives onto one street before you do, you can no longer go down that path. You have to find another way. And that's exactly how routing works on the Lightning Network. When the Lightning Network becomes centralized, there are less hops, less pathways that you have to go down in order to make your payment, because there's going to be a singular node that has many different channels open with many different other nodes, a lot of other nodes. And if you have to go less hops, then there's a higher percentage chance that your transaction will be successful. So this then opens the door for the banks to come in and run nodes. They will be able to provide the right amount of liquidity to have that node operational and facilitating payments. and they will be able to keep their nodes running 24/7, unlike average users. And basically, yeah, it replicates the current banking system in the long term, but now on Bitcoin. And here we have a snapshot of visualization of the Lightning Network. You can view it in real time at this link, but already you can see what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about when I say a centralized star, because we've got a single node here with many different connections coming off to other nodes, and there's a handful of them on here that you can see that are really big. In the long term, they're just going to get even bigger, and yeah, that's not decentralized as they claim. So today there is only one version of Bitcoin which is actually staying true to the original vision, the original white paper that set out to be peer-to-peer electronic cash that is free to transact to anyone in the world, no third parties, and that's Bitcoin Cash. So we are following the on-chain scaling roadmap that Satoshi Nakamoto and Gavin Andresen believed in, and we haven't had any problems so far. In fact, our transactions are once again instant and basically free, and bigger block sizes haven't caused any issues whatsoever. So people are already stress testing this and trying to fill up the blocks with transactions, and yeah, no problems. So it's important to understand that this is the real version of Bitcoin. The only thing that the now Lightning Network version of Bitcoin, we now call it Bitcoin Core, the only thing that has retained is the BTC ticker that is traded, used to identify Bitcoin on exchanges where it's traded. And through that, they have allowed, it has allowed them to deceive many newcomers entering this space, because they see, oh, Bitcoin, BTC, that's what I've heard about on the news, but they don't look into the history or what the technology is actually like now compared to the original white paper. And yeah, they're just getting involved in something that is not what they thought it was. This is Bitcoin Cash is now Bitcoin. So yeah, well, hopefully I have informed you on some things you may not have known about prior to this video, but spread the word. If your friends are talking about Bitcoin, let them know this is actually what's happened, and now Bitcoin Cash is the one that wants to be peer-to-peer electronic cash, not a Ponzi scheme that actually is useless and crumbling before our very eyes. And help your mates out, and I can guarantee you that in the long term this is the version that will be succeeding. It's not going to be this other one. They're heading downhill, as I've already shown you, and Bitcoin Cash is gaining momentum. Tune in for more videos later this week. If you found this content useful, please like and subscribe. Catch you next time.